So today I wanted to talk a little about the precepts. Of course, that could be a long talk, right? Depends. We start to explore the precepts. It's a lifetime study, and many different ways that we could approach the precepts. It's been on my mind lately. I'm doing some study with a long-time student of Mahayana, Roshi, who was my teacher's teacher, who has come back to study. He'd almost finished with Mahayana Roshi, and now he's kind of finishing his formal training. And in the Zen tradition, the precept study takes place kind of at the end of formal study, at the end of Koan study. And so I'm going over the precepts again in depth. Earlier this year, we looked at the paramis, the perfections, the 10 perfections. So you may remember that. And in those 10 perfections, the precepts come up as the second step in the perfection, sila, or ethical conduct. So there are precepts, ethical conduct. And in the Mahayana, or the later version of the perfections, where 10 gets shrunk down to 6, the precepts, the ethical conduct, thankfully made the final cut and made it into the 6. Also comes in as the second step. The first one being dana, generosity. Right? But this generosity being the beginning point for human beings that have made the decision that not wanting to just live a purely self-centric life that's just about this one here and everything that I want to get out of it, but have taken a step, taken that shift that looks out and with a generosity of spirit, with an intention there that really wants everybody to do well and everybody to prosper. You know, it's like a basic feeling of goodwill and wanting the best for all. In the early Buddhist communities, it became clear right from the beginning that we needed some guardrails to live with one another. Right? We can agree on for human beings we need some guardrails for ethical conduct, how to live amongst other people. A wonderful way to maintain the precepts is to practice sitting, meditation. You can only get yourself into so much trouble sitting quietly like this for 30 minutes, right? We can certainly break we can get ourselves into a little bit of trouble between the ears, but then if we're doing that, then really we've fallen off from meditation and sitting, and then we're sitting there thinking about things. The word that we use, precept, in its etymology, has an interesting translation, right, which is pre, which is before, and sept is taking, before taking. And I looked into that a little more deeply in how that is translated from the Latin. And taking is kind of like taking a step, meant in a kind of before taking a step, or before, another way to say it would, before advancement. Before going forward, before advancement. It's about the precept before stepping forward, before advancing the self. That's our route. So if we look at our practice of still sitting, of course, when I bring up some guidance or some instruction at the beginning, I can't help but look to my own training or practice experience, and so it has the Zen style, Zen approach of just sitting, shikantaza in Japanese, just sitting meditation, which really is as beautifully simple and direct as that. For 30 minutes, you just sit, nothing else. Nothing else. But of course, that's very difficult to say, and often in practice, much more difficult to to practice. Right? There's an old story that I read about Albert Einstein where he was either his partner or somebody in his employ, someone was there, just once rebuked him and said that he was wasting his time just sitting in his armchair all day doing nothing. He used to like sit and think, and he witfully responded by saying, "I'm not doing nothing, I'm drawing a perfectly straight line through four-dimensional space-time." Right, so I'm not sure how you can imagine how that landed. Even Einstein wasn't doing nothing when he was sitting in a chair. But what is it to be able to sit and really, just like the instruction at the beginning, which I'm giving to myself, reminding myself, right, all right, for this period of time, allowing, notice, see what's here, allow, stop, look, allow whatever's internally appearing or seems to appear, and then whatever is externally thus or seeming to appear, and then to disengage the reaction function, disengage the stirring the content, but deeply settling and deeply allowing this one, this self, this broader self, to be experienced in awareness. When we do that, when that is entered in, although, words get clumsy, when we do that, we can't do that. I can't do that. I, me, can't do that. Sitting is letting I, me rest for a while. It's like you've been busy. Take some time, just drop off. You can let that I, me really rest in sitting. And then maintain the precept before advancing, before going towards the next thought, or the next impulse, or the next problem, or the next reaction to the content. Just maintain thusness, maintain presence. And you can see that presence or that awareness is not personal to just or mine. There's no possession in it, like it's my awareness or your awareness. We're clearly all experiencing this same curious awareness, all reflected and expressed differently by everybody in the room and on Zoom, all shining through a little differently. But at the root, the same awareness, the same stillness before advancing, before going forward. If you really delve in and sit in that way, it becomes then powerful refuge. A real refuge where the ceaseless machinations and problems of me, I, it's not that those are turned off, right? Those who have tried, serial meditators over the years, right? You can try to distract or displace. But the most direct approach is to allow, but have then no relationship to the content. Just let things be, radically accept and allow things to be as they are. But of course we don't spend all of our time just sitting. What I'm talking about there is really the absolute or sameness principle that we lean toward or we lean into in our practice of sitting and in practice of mindful awareness. But we're living in the world. And so if I come back to these precepts, of course the early monks and nuns in the Buddhist community, they developed long lists, a lot of precepts. It turns out there's a lot of ways that you can cause trouble as a human being. Right, so they would add a new one into the Vinaya. It's like, really? Okay, and then, you're going to have to go on the back of the page here and keep adding more and more. And then over time, over the centuries, as householders and regular people became more involved in Buddhist practice, those precepts were given as 5 precepts. 5 basic precepts for householders. I'm technically a monk still, a priest, but I very much think of myself more as a householder, living a kind of householder lifestyle. So that's good news. I'm down to 5. I can just maintain 5 well, right? And those 5 that I just wanted to bring up today, and of course, for a Dharma talk, one talk, easier to look at a short number like this, these 5 precepts would be refrain from taking life or killing, refrain from stealing, refrain from sexual misconduct, refrain from telling lies, and refrain from being intoxicated. Those are like 5 basic precepts. And again, these arise and are used not as like a kind of a strict commandment of don't do that. I mean, if you join a Buddhist community or you become ordained or you take these on, there is that aspect of like, no, you don't do that. And so, it can be taken as having a kind of a thou shalt notness to it, but we don't have to take it in that way. We can look at it in the way of, here are 5 human classic ways of screwing things up. Right? 5 big ones in ways in which we cause harm to ourselves, to others, and to the world at large. And the root of the precepts, one could say, is, again, before advancement. Another way to look at that is refrain from. Like a refrain from doing certain things. Right? And that me, I, self, as a human being, wants to do lots of things. Wants things. And so pursues objects of mind in so many different ways. That's our human nature, right? That we're very familiar with. But we also know that we need to, we have a broad kind of social contract, even like right here, the way that we practice among one another. There's certain things that we have agreed to refrain from. We might like to do certain things or want to do certain things, but we understand that to do many things causes harm. So we refrain from those. The first one can seem very clear. Don't kill. Don't refrain from taking life. Buddhism, like many of the great spiritual traditions and religions of India, with Hinduism, with Jainism, take the Jains, they take that they go very far in that direction, sweeping the ground in front of them to avoid treading on insects. In the way that we look at it perhaps more in our practice is for each person is where do you really draw the line over taking life? Like where is that line? I would say that in my own study of the precepts, what's come more to the fore now is there are different ways more in the Theravada view, or in a strict view, and I have friends who'll correct me if I'm wrong here, would be, the spirit of the precept is very much refrain from doing these things, and you can really take that as just a firm rule, as a firmer rule, right? You agree to refrain from doing these things. Now, in the Mahayana view, or in the Zen view, in which I've studied more, right? It's like there's a sense of you should broadly refrain from doing these things that cause harm, unless there's a good reason to do so to save greater harm, right? Now, but for myself, I've grown to appreciate the older school version of the precepts was actually just refrain from. Because that kind of, the end, the way I look at it is the end never justifies the means. Am I getting that the right way around? Did I said like right? I was going to get that the wrong way around. It's like the means are the end. The means are the end all the way through. How we live, how we act, how we express, how we move in the world, that's who we are. That's what we are. And if we can stay on the side of refrain from harm, then we uphold and help the better qualities, the better aspects of human nature to flourish. And clearly, as we look into the world, there is a lack of precept. There is a lack of ethical conduct in all kinds of areas. Left to run amok, the human desire complex causes pain and difficulty. That's as true now as it was 2,500 years ago, for sure. Nothing has changed. Now, the first one is do not take life. We can certainly take that as literally do not kill things. People, animals, plants, whatever that might be. But all of these precepts can really broaden out. You can look at, like, what is it to do not kill? We can just kill somebody's opportunity to express themselves. You know, I see that really, like, in my role, like, when I'm teaching, if it's, like, one-on-one, most of that teaching is listening to somebody else and just holding space or being space. So that somebody, and I can see my own I self that wants to just leap in there and say, okay, yeah, okay. Wants to get to the end of the question and answer it. Wants to, like, mansplain it or what, you know, wants to kind of, like, leap in there. But that is like, it's a milder form of killing or taking life, but it's still a breach of that precept. Right? When we look to the next one, the refrain from stealing, refrain from taking what isn't ours. I read some time ago about how I think it was like Apple AirPods are one of the most stolen things. You know, it's just like people who would never steal anything are like, ooh, those. The AirPods Pro, somebody left those here, you know, and it's like nothing. It's like where people who would normally not, like, someone's not going to go steal a car, but they're just like, I don't know, this thing though, this is like a particular kind of shiny object, you know? So we all have all of our limit or where we could be tested there. And again, stealing might not be something as gross as breaking a window and grabbing something. But it can be like, what are the ways in which we steal? Like, it can be like stealing attention, for instance. Right? Lots of different ways we can look at this. Next one, refraining from sexual misconduct. Gosh, in Dharma Sanghas, since we've inherited a lot of the teachings from the primarily Eastern traditions, as those have been adopted and started to be practiced in the West, we've had a lot of difficulty with this particular precept. Right? People not refraining from sexual misconduct. It turns out that when people are put in positions of unrestrained power and influence, that they break the precepts. Go figure, right? So it's not that maybe more years ago, but I think even now we need to be careful about this. That if you think somebody is enlightened, that they're going to act ethically, think again, because that's not true. Right? To become more enlightened or more awake, you see how life functions, and you can be much more aligned with reality and have a closer understanding of what's real. But right there is that I self that hasn't agreed to that view. And so teachers, certainly more than students perhaps, need to have these, need to practice these guardrails and have these precepts. It's not that people become awake and then they suddenly act chivalrous and have wonderful ethics. I mean, that's relatively, yeah, perhaps so to some degree, but it can't be relied upon. And then refraining from telling lies. You know, Zen teacher Dogen had an interesting way of putting this precept that he said, refraining from lies, that lies are kind of like hollow speech. When I look at it this way. When you tell a lie, it's like you're selling somebody a reality that doesn't exist. Right? It's telling an untruth. It's describing something that's real, but it's not. They're going to say, like, it's kind of hollow. There's no there. Telling a lie. And again, all of these ones, when we look into them, there's ways that you could say, sometimes telling a lie is for the greater good. Like an expedient lie. But I would just say, that may be so, but one should be really sure before going against the spirit of the precepts. And the fifth one, and again, just speed running these, right? But we could spend a lot of time on each one, is refraining from being intoxicated. There's the obvious intoxicants of drinking too much, and consuming drugs, and those things. But again, shades here as we like, well, what is it to be intoxicated by anger? Perhaps intoxicated with an idea, intoxicated with a cause or a belief or an opinion. So just 5 precepts here, which really, each one is so broad. But in our practice life, I typically emphasize awakening and realization first. Which means, the Buddha said, first see the emptiness, then study cause and effect. And that translation, first see the emptiness, is first see this absolute principle where this me, I can rest, be set aside, and you can really realize and explore a deeper, fuller, vaster aspect of presence and self, which is not just being always poured through the filter of me, I. Right? If we open up to that broader one, then this is seeing the emptiness, or seeing that this awareness that we are is much bigger than just the me, I, and my issue, and whatever's going on with me, self. And then from there, then study cause and effect. And we study then cause and effect all of our life. Study consequences. Being a practitioner, a dharma practitioner, someone who is more wakeful, more intimate with life, more awake and aware, what really grows there is the ability to hold space or be space. Ability to be able to be present, encounter things in our life, and where formerly we might be very reactive and have an automatic response, instead there is enough space to pause and choose how to respond rather than just react. And that's where these deeper principles or ways of non-harming can come to the fore. And even deeper than that, in the sense of if we are a present and aware person, like that is what is being transmitted, that is what is being expressed, then a lot of this, the way that we function, can be kind of outsourced to our broader being. And what I mean by that is rather than just living as like me, I, and what I want and what's next, right? We stand much more rooted in you're walking and talking and being the whole world wherever you go. You're this whole world. You're this whole of Longbeach, whole of this church, whole of this place. And you see, in a much more visceral way, in a real way, that you have what you need. You have what you need. That needs are met here, as one that you are. When our needs are met, we're much less likely to confuse our needs for our wants, and then run after objects of mind in an effort to kind of assuage our suffering. Like, if I can get that, or if I can get then, or I can, right? Or I can do, then I'll be happy. Then that will fill the void. Nothing fills the void. The void is already full. So much better to just sit and really realize that deeply. This is the void. This is emptiness. And miraculously, it's full of people and things and beauty and everything in every direction. What lack is there? What need is there? So, there's a lot to say, or you could say about the precepts, but I'll pause at this point so I don't overrun here. And there's probably a precept about yapping on too much, which I'll violate if I go further.
Hi, I'm Brad with Long Beach Meditation. Your gracious generosity makes this programming possible. If you found this video to be of value, please consider making a donation here. If you'd like to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to stay up to date with Long Beach Meditation, click here to subscribe. Thank you.